the future-proof skills you need. I didn't do a series specifically talking about these yet, and that's why I'm doing it now. And this is going to be a 4-part series, but I mention future-proof skills all the time here on the show, or at least the concept of future-proof skills. And I was actually surprised when I realized that I hadn't actually done full episodes explaining them yet, how to develop them and why you actually need them. So I have, as I said, I've touched on this many times. Now this series will basically be in place. This series will be in place so that next time I reference future-proof skills, I can just point you to these masterclass episodes, which again will always be available and categorized properly inside of workonyourgameuniversity.com. So these skills are going to make you immune to any technological or societal changes that may render other skills of yours completely irrelevant. So there are certain skills that all of us have that we will no longer get so much, let's say, return on investment for having, simply because technology and society change in certain ways that mean having that skill isn't as valuable as it used to be. Right? It used to be valuable to be able to, let's see if we can come up with an example. It used to be valuable to be able to write a letter and send it to somebody in the physical mail. That is still valuable in some ways. People appreciate getting letters, but a lot of people nowadays, when they want to send written communication to a person, you send an email or a text message. And those are very easy to do and take less commitment than writing on a letter, putting it in an envelope, finding a stamp, and taking it to the mailbox. All right, so the skill has become, even though it still exists, is less valuable simply because technology and society have changed in certain ways. The skills we're going to talk about here today will never be rendered obsolete, no matter what changes in technology, no matter what changes in society. So you want to make sure you have as many of these future-proof skills under your belt as possible, because the more of them you have, the more future-proof you are. Therefore, whatever changes in the world, you will always be valuable. Does that make sense? Good. Point number one. Topic here today is the first of our 4-part series, the future-proof skills that you need. Number one, communication skill. Now, communication is a very wide topic, and I'm going to go into subtopics of communication, other aspects of communication that will also be future-proof as we go further into this series. But communication in general, the better a communicator you are, the more future-proof you will be. All right, you can burn that one onto your brain. The ability to get your point across, both verbally, in the written format, non-verbally, to an individual person or to a group of people. These are all forms of communication. Also, your ability to communicate with technology, for example. As more artificial intelligence becomes ubiquitous, or artificial intelligence becomes more ubiquitous, the better you are at communicating what you want the AI to do for you. If you happen to be using something like that, the better the AI will be able to do the job that you want done. If you ask, as any of you who uses any type of AI or chatbot or software like that, you know that the key is what they call the prompt. The prompt is basically what you tell the AI that you want, and the more clear your prompt, the higher the likelihood that the AI does what you want it to do. And if your prompt is trash, then the output of the AI is usually also trash. So the only way we can get across to others what we want, and others can also be your computer or your coding software, we get across to others what we want, who we are, how we feel, and anything else, how we want people to do things, is through our ability to communicate. So the best communicators tend to ascend to the highest positions of leadership. Think about it. The best communicators tend to ascend to the highest positions of leadership. Not necessarily the highest achievers, just the best communicators. You can be a high achiever while being a poor communicator in some areas of life. But you can never ascend to a leadership position where you get others to trade their time, effort, and attention on your behalf. You cannot do that if you are not a strong communicator. Because in order to get other people to take their time, their energy, and their attention and devote it to something that you want them to do, hopefully that benefits them as well, you have to be able to communicate to them what you want them to do, how you want them to do it, and you have to be able to motivate/inspire them to take that action on your behalf or per your request. That requires strong communication skills. You cannot get other people to do anything for you if you can't communicate to them what you want them to do, or how and when or why you want them to do it. Any of you who's in a leadership position, if you're a sports coach, you have to communicate to your players what you want them to do and get them to actually do it. If you're a sports coach, you may have other coaches on your staff. You have to communicate to them. You have to communicate up the ladder to whoever your superiors may be as to what's going on. You have to communicate that way, and you got to communicate down the ladder. And if you works in any form of management where There are people above you, and there are people who are subordinate to you. You have to have good communication going both directions, because you got to communicate well with the higher ups who have power over you, and you got to communicate well with the subordinates who over whom you have power. And if you fail in communication in either direction, then you're probably not going to do too well at your job. All right, so strong communication skills matter everywhere, especially in the workplace, because again, this is how you move up. Any of you who works in a workspace, ask yourself, look at the leaders around you. Whether you're one of the leaders and you see others, or you're not one of the leaders, but you see the leaders, are they all really good communicators? If they're not, they may not be leaders for long. And if they are, that's probably the reason why they got there. Yes, they probably had to perform at some level as well, but the leadership skill is best demonstrated through communication, not necessarily through performance. Not necessarily through performance. Now, there are some high achievers out there. For example, a high achiever can be a really bad communicator and move up to a certain level and be rewarded for their performance, but they can never ascend to leadership simply because they don't have the communication skills to lead. And if a high performer with poor communication skills is incorrectly, in my assessment, put into a leadership position, then there will be calamitous results from putting the wrong person in the wrong spot. A high performer who cannot communicate is not a leader. They're just a high performer. There's a difference. And there are some leaders who weren't that great at performing. Maybe they were just average, but they become really good leaders because they're good at communicating. You see this actually a lot in sports coaching that I just referenced. A lot of the best coaches in basketball, for example, even football, they played football or basketball, but they may not have played even at the highest level, such as the NBA or NFL. Maybe they played college, or maybe they played overseas, or they played on some semi-pro level, or even if they played in the NBA or NFL, they were a role player or a marginal player. They were not some star player, but they become really good coaches, not because of their playing careers, because obviously if that was the case, then we have every legendary player would just be coaching. Tom Brady would be coaching, Michael Jordan, all those guys would be coaching. They're not, because the leadership skills and the ability to communicate is more important than how good of a player you actually were when you were on the field or on the court. And it's also the willingness to do it. And it's also part of the skill of communication is being able to put yourself in another person's shoes. So in the sports world, for example, one of the reasons why players like Michael Jordan wouldn't make for a good coach is because Michael Jordan does not know what it feels like to be the 10th guy in a rotation of 12 people on a basketball team, because he was always the number one guy. So he could not relate to the guy sitting at the end of the bench. What is he going to talk to them about? He can't understand their situation. He was never that himself. He can't relate to that person. But Steve Kerr, who was Michael Jordan's teammate, he was a role player. So he was equidistant from the superstars like Michael Jordan as he was from the guys at the end of the bench. And there were times he was the guy at the end of the bench, and there were times when he was closer to the guys who were the stars. So he can relate to more people. And because he wasn't so great as a player, he was good, but not great as a player, he had to develop some other skills. He couldn't just go off of his talent alone, because that alone would not have sustained him the way talent alone, and when I say talent, I just mean performing ability. Let's just call it that. Performing ability would sustain somebody like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan didn't have to be a great communicator. He could just be a great performer, and being a great performer was enough because of who he was. Not everybody is Michael Jordan. So you have to compensate for what you don't have that he does have, so you can stay at the level that he's at. So this communication skill is a big deal. So without the ability to communicate, you cannot multiply the results of your inputs. Let me say that sentence again. Without the ability to communicate, you cannot multiply the results of your inputs, because to multiply the results of your inputs, you somehow, some way need to get other entities other than yourself, people, systems, groups, businesses, etc., doing something in place of you doing it. If you don't have the ability to communicate what you want to anyone else, then everything that you get done must be done by you. The problem is you can only be in one place at a time. You only have so much time, you only have so much talent, and you only have so much energy. So you can't multiply your results. You can work harder and increase your results, but you cannot multiply them unless you have other things besides you working for or with you. That requires your ability to communicate what you want and how you want it, so it can get done without you having to do it all yourself. This is why communication skills are a force multiplier. So you need to get really good at writing, speaking, and conversing. Writing is writing it down. Speaking is saying it out loud. Conversing is the back and forth dialogue with another person. And part of communication is also listening, by the way. Don't forget that part. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is the future-proof skills that you need. This is going to be a 4-part series. Point number 2 is conflict resolution. I just told you that a bunch of things I'm going to share in this series are subtopics underneath the header of communication. So one communication skill is your ability to resolve conflict. This could be internal conflict, such as in your own mind, conflict with yourself, and also, of course, external conflict, conflicts between other people, whether you are one of those people or you are maybe trying to mediate a conflict between two other people, such as those of you in leadership positions. You may have two employees who are quarreling with each other, or you may have two players on your team, sports coaches, who are not seeing eye to eye with each other. Your ability to resolve that conflict is a communication skill, and it's a future-proof skill because, and let me also say this, I need to explain this with each of these points. One of the reasons why I call these a future-proof skills, you should ask yourself, can a computer do this? Will there ever be a computer program that can do this instead of me doing it? See, there's no computer program that can resolve a conflict better than a human being can resolve a conflict. You understand? This is why it's a future-proof skill. So one branch of communication is the ability to solve problems internally and externally. And there is no black and white code-based program that will be able to solve conflicts as well as a human being, because a human being can do things that a computer can never do. I could technically, with enough information, I could give a computer every possible response that I could possibly say to any conflict that another person, two people could bring to me. So let's say I have a team of people working for me, and I can log and basically brainstorm every possible conflict that could happen between anyone who ever works for me ever in history. Let's say it's 100,000 different things that could happen. And I could train my chatbot on all 100,000 possible conflicts and how I would respond to every one of those 100,000 possible conflicts, every possible permutation. This would be millions and millions of lines of code, I'm assuming. I'm not a coder, but let's say it's millions of lines of code explaining all the possible permutations of anything they could say and any problem they could bring up. And technically, that chatbot could resolve any conflict if the people would just bring the conflict to the chatbot. Here's the problem. When human beings are in conflict, usually they are emotionally aroused and they usually don't want to deal with a fucking computer or a chatbot when that happens. They usually want to deal with a human being. Why? Because a human being has something that no computer will ever have, which is human touch. And when I say touch, I don't mean physically touching you. I mean touch as in you can modulate your words. All right, there's a certain tone that I can use when I'm trying to get a point across one way, and there's a different tone I'll use when I'm trying to get the same point across, but in a different way to a different person for a different reason and in a different setting. That type of touch cannot be copied by a computer, at least not with today's technology. Now, there may be somebody listening to this, some tech geek listening to this who's thinking, well, Dre, that's what you think. All right, wait about 10 years and we're going to have computers doing exactly that. Possibly. The thing is, there will always be humans who want to deal with a human. All right, so that's the reason why I'm saying that the theory that I just laid out, there's somebody probably working on that theory right now. Any conflict you bring to it, it will resolve the conflict by just going through a decision tree. It's going to ask you question after question. It's going to give you an answer after you answer all the questions. Somebody's working on that right now, and they probably already exist. The thing is, I don't always want to talk to computers. Sometimes I want to talk to a fucking person, and that's what I mean when I say conflict resolution. So you have an issue at a restaurant, you ask to speak to the manager. You don't want a robot to come out there with a touch screen for you to tell what your problem is. You want to talk to an actual human who can actually listen to you and look you in the eye and tell you, I understand your problem. Thank you for telling me about that. You get it? Not a robot. So your ability to solve conflicts also contributes to your ability to lead, because others will be willing to follow you when they see and they believe that you can figure out resolutions and help people get on the same page when everyone else has not been able to get themselves on the same page. A good leader has this ability. And keep in mind that a leader also has to have the willingness to displease certain people, and sometimes all the people at times, in order to make sure that the leader is making decisions that's in the best interest of the group, not the best interest of one individual person. See, a good leader has to have that ability. And a good leader who is good at communication, good at listening, and good at showing that you give a damn about the people on your team, you buy yourself the credit, so to speak, to displease certain people in your organization at times because they know that you have their best interest at heart. So they will accept the fact that maybe you displease them on Tuesday because they know all the other days this year and all the other situations you've been in, you do have their best interest at heart. It just doesn't, your decision just happens to not align with what they would want right now, but they're all right with that. They will accept that because they know that your heart and your mind are in the right place. Now, again, can a computer communicate that? No. Now, is there some software company out there with some developers working on code that can do what I just said, absolutely. They're actually probably listening to this episode and downloading it into their uh, language learning model, uh, and figuring out, hey, how do we get a computer to do what Dre just described? All right, so they're going to solve that problem, or at least they think they will. I'm here to say that there are people out there who will always want to get that from a human, never from a computer, no matter if there's a computer who claims it can do it perfectly. Keep in mind, again, a leader must be willing to disappoint people in order to hold your leadership position. You cannot please everybody all the time while still being a leader, which means there will always be conflict, which means you have to have the ability to resolve it. A leader must have this. It's not optional. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is the first of our 4-part series here, future-proof skills that you need. Number 3, complex decision making. So what I just described about the software geeks out there who are trying to figure out how to have a robot or a chat bot that can actually do these communication things that I'm saying are human-based and future-proof, their ability to understand what I'm saying and teach some software to do it is a form of complex decision making. See, complex decision making involves you have to solve a problem that has multiple angles and dimensions to it. It's not just a black and white thing. So if I said my problem is, hey, Chat GPT, I need to write a 10-page paper on Thomas Edison, that's not a complex problem. It's a problem, but it's not complex, because all I had to do is go get the information about Thomas Edison, or at least the information I choose to accept about him, and I can go write the paper, or I can have my AI chatbot write the paper for me. That's a simple decision. A complex decision is when there are several angles to the situation, such as when there's a conflict between two subordinates of yours at work, and one of the subordinates is relatives with one of your superiors, and the other one is the best performer that you have on the team, and you really can't afford to piss off either one of them because it could hurt you in one way or another. And you got to resolve this conflict because these are two people who need to work together, and neither one of them is getting fired. And you got to figure that out, while at the same time you got 10 other things that your executive assistant is telling you need to handle today, and you got a full schedule, and you still have to solve that problem. See, that's complex decision making. See, a robot can't figure that out. But again, there's someone trying to program a robot to figure it out, but they ain't there yet. This is another thing that computers, again, are being trained to be better at, but the ability for a human being to do this is always going to be highly valued. All right, this will always be highly valued. So looking at a situation that has, what I mean by complex decision making, looking at a situation that has multiple pieces and multiple parts to it, and figuring out how to massage or finesse, if you will, the situation, even if it means disappointing some people in some ways and in some areas. See, that's a complex situation. Like, you got to be disappointed about this part right here, but I'm going to take care of you on these other 4 things. You're going to be disappointed in these 3 things, and I'm going to satisfy you in this one area, but I'm going to take care of you in the future when the next thing comes up. And we got to balance that out. And the whole team, we all got to get on the same page to do this, because I know this doesn't make any of you 100% happy, but this is going to help the team. And y'all going to do this for me because I've already bought goodwill with you all through what I've been doing as a leader up to this point. See, you got to be able to do that. That's complex decision making, and it's communication skill. See how all of these start to mix in, and we're only getting started here. So this is something that computers are not able to do, and let alone if they were able to do it. The key point in all of this is being able to communicate it. And when you're dealing with other human beings, again, we talked about this over and over again here on the show, is not what you say, it's how you say it. That's what really matters the most to people. And a computer does not have this ability. A computer can tell you what it says, but how it says it doesn't quite have that touch. We're not there yet. That may come, but we're not there yet. And I believe that there will always be a clear line of delineation between when I'm talking to a computer and when I'm talking to a human being. I think in our lifetimes, I think that line will always be there. Now, maybe 100 years from now, when all of us are pretty much gone, but the new wave is out, maybe that will no longer exist as people are raised digitally these days. Maybe it'll change. But the era that we're in now, I think in our lifetimes, as all of us listening and who are alive today, I think we will always be able to tell the difference between I'm talking to a computer and I'm talking to a human being, at least in person, let's just say. On the internet, there's a whole different story. So computers aren't quite there. And humans have to do this all the time, especially those of you who are in any form of leadership position. And leadership position can simply be leadership as the head of your household. So this encompasses both thinking and communication, because you have to make decisions, you got to consider the ramifications of those decisions, and you got to communicate your decisions to others while keeping those ramifications in mind and dealing with the responses of other people, because you don't know how they're going to respond. So all of this that becomes a very complex situation when you think about it. So this is multiple skills combined into one concept, And this is something that a computer is not going to be able to do the way that a human can do. That's why it's a future-proof ability. So if you have this, keep using it because it's very useful and you won't be replaced. And if you don't have it, I suggest you get it because this will protect you from the encroaching technology that's coming for your career. Recapping, first part of our 4-part series here, the future-proof skills you need. These are skills that will always make you valuable and useful no matter what changes in society. Number one is communication skill. This is a broad topic, and many of the things we're going to talk about in this series are underneath the umbrella of simple communication, which involves both getting your point across and also receiving other people's points. Number two, conflict resolution. All right, solving problems amongst people. Most people do not want to solve problems or deal with pressure, stress, or any type of conflict. So your willingness and ability to do so makes you valuable just by the law of contrast. Number three, complex decision making. Dealing with situations that are not so black and white and so cut and dried that have multiple dimensions to them. Most people don't want to deal with problems at all, let alone complicated problems. Your willingness and ability to do so, again, separates you even further through the law of contrast because you're willing to do something and you can do it well, something that other people don't even want to touch. So develop these skills and you will block the future from taking you out of the game. WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com, folks. WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com. You'll like to have me as your direct coach so I can coach you. I've coached many people through these very things. So all these things you hear me talking about here on the show, I've coached people through them. I've taught them to people. I've codified these things. I've systematized these things. I've strategized on these things. That's why I'm able to talk about them the way that I do here on the show. So you want to take this to a higher level, that's where you go. That link down below in the description. Again, it's WorkOnYourGameUniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all